About 5 years ago, John and I guess I started first. I interviewed a man named Grove Norwood. Grove Norwood had just lost a daughter in a car accident where his best friend, a black man, was the man who hit his daughter, and ultimately Grove had to learn one of the most interesting stories, and that is to learn how to forgive someone who's your best friend for killing your daughter. What was most interesting was the fact that he told me, when I interviewed him on the radio program that John and I have in Houston, he said, when the program was all over, I don't understand what the relationship is between the prison in Angola and other prisons in Texas contacting me as a result of the movie that they've seen. The movie is called, and you may have heard it, it's called The Heart of Texas. And the last 4 minutes of that particular movie are the most incredible because of the fact that they talk about forgiveness. Forgiveness in a way that most of us pastors have never articulated that. And way at the last of that particular movie, as I was interviewing him on the radio, I said, Grove, when you told the world in this movie that you forgave your black friend, what did that mean to you? He said, I've come to learn that forgiveness is something so unreal that only one who understands Jesus Christ can receive it and give it. He said, I've come to understand that at the basis of every person's problems, anxieties, depressions, fear, is unwillingness to forgive. And the beauty of that was that he turned to me in tears at the radio station and he said, what relationship does contacting prisoners of me have to do with that movie? I said, when prisoners have somehow seen that movie and seen the last 4 minutes and talk about forgiveness, they've learned something that they didn't know when they were out committing a crime. Each one of them would tell you that when they picked up their gun or when they killed or robbed, it was a split-second decision. And for a split-second decision like this, it will last forever in this world, in the penitentiary. But when you told them that Jesus Christ offers forgiveness, most of them had never heard that before. And so as a result of it, he begged me. He said, would you please go with me to this place called Angola? It's the bloodiest penitentiary in the country. And I said, why do you want me to go there? He said, because men's lives are being transformed in a way that I've never understood it. I said, well, Jesus Christ changes lives. And so he took me to the penitentiary. I was not very happy about that because I've been in penitentiaries before and I've never liked them. But when you walked inside of this penitentiary for 2.5 days, one thing that you really saw for the first time, men were not dressed in the garb of prisoners. In the parts of the penitentiary where John eventually went, as I went, these men were dressed in clothes like we're wearing today. They were men in the seminary. They were men who were committed to learning that as they could be forgiven by the blood of Jesus Christ, so could they offer that same word of forgiveness to their gangs and the people that followed them. What we came to discover in Angola was the simple fact that all the gang leaders had become pastors. They had become spiritual leaders inside the penitentiary. And what was so amazing about this is that they have churches inside the penitentiary. In Angola alone, there are 50 churches, 450 services held per week. They're all held by felons who will never get out of the penitentiary, people who have lost their freedom on the outside to gain the freedom on the inside. So after I was there in the penitentiary for 2.5 days, I saw everything. Like John eventually went and he saw it himself. And what we saw in the penitentiary was men whose lives were the worst of the worst, men who have committed crimes for which they will never get out of prison, men whose lives were transformed by Jesus. And the more I thought about this, the more I said, why is the world not doing this? Why is the community of Christian people not doing this? What is the problem? And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that's a tough sell to start from scratch, with people who have never been involved in ministry before, to think about what would it look like if we would do like Paul did and turn his cell into a seminary in Rome. What would it look like if every man that we visited in the penitentiary, every man that has committed a crime for which he will never get out, eventually was put into the seminary and became a pastor?
Okay, so Angola was the bloodiest prison in America, the most violent. And if this kind of change can happen there, it can happen anywhere. So this is starting of a movement where they're trying to take this to every state and find an accredited church-related institution to run a satellite operation in a prison so we can commission, not ordain, commission men to work as chaplains, assistants, and teachers. The results of this kind of thing has been a reduction of inmate-on-inmate violence of 75 to 80%. Baylor is doing a study that will be published in June. So all the hard data is coming out. There has not been a murder there since 2000. About 1999, they were running at 40 murders a year. And you bring the church in. This is indigenous missionaries